Good evening. Thanks for being with us tonight. I know it's Labor Day. I hope you got some time off. But you know, the news does not rest. So here we are. More than a month after the Trump administration was ordered by a federal judge to reunite the families that the administration had split up at the border, nearly 500 toddlers and little kids are still being held by the U.S. government apart from their parents. When the Trump administration started this policy of ripping kids away from their parents and not giving them back, we now know that they thought no one would mind that they were doing it. One current administration official involved with the policy telling Jonathan Blitzer at The New Yorker, quote, "The expectation was that no one would care." Turns out people cared. The country cares. And amid the public outcry against this policy, on June 20th, President Trump formally ended his administration's policy of continuing to take parents away from their kids. So today it's supposedly not the policy anymore, but because of the haphazard way they implemented it in the first place, because they literally developed no plan while they were ripping kids out of their parents' arms to keep track of where they were sending those kids and those parents, we're now in a situation where even though the policy is over and a court has ordered the president to give the kids back, 500 of them still haven't been given back. And the advocacy organizations like the ACLU fighting the administration in court tell us that there's no real sign that the administration is working all that hard to fix that and to get the kids back, even though now they are under court order. So this scandal, it wears on day after day, week after week. When we do hear about rare belated reunions between parents and their kids now, the reports are heartbreaking in a whole new way. Toddlers who crawl away from their parents at the sight of them because they no longer recognize their own parents because they have been separated from them for so long. Kids who seem to have radically changed while being held alone without their parents by the administration. Court order or no, that is Donald Trump's family separation scandal. It just does not end. It is not fixed. But you might remember, before this particular Trump administration scandal landed on the country like a moral nuclear bomb, several months ago there was another big scandal over the Trump administration's treatment of immigrant kids. And it was the case of Jane Doe. Jane Doe is the pseudonym assigned by a court for a 17-year-old pregnant girl who the Trump administration tried to force to give birth against her will last fall. Jane Doe, 17 years old, was picked up by the Trump administration at the border. She was put in a shelter in Texas overseen by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. While she was there, she found out she was pregnant. She did not want to have the baby. She did not want to go through with the pregnancy. In America, whether you're an immigrant or not, there is a constitutionally protected right to get an abortion in this country if you want to have one. The government is not allowed to stop you from doing that. It is your right to decide for yourself. So teenage girl Jane Doe finds out she is pregnant. She decides firmly that she definitely wants to have an abortion. She raises the money to pay for it. She actually got a Texas court, got a judge to explicitly grant her permission to make that decision for herself without parental consent, since she isn't an adult. She arranged for transportation to get herself to and from her doctor's appointment so she could get the procedure done. She doesn't need any help with any of this. She has arranged for it all herself. But the federal government still blocked her. She was being held at this shelter overseen by Health and Human Services, a federal agency led by Trump political appointees. And they said no, they would physically not allow her to leave the shelter to go to her doctor's appointment. So the ACLU sued the Trump administration on her behalf.
They were literally holding her hostage, blocking the door, preventing her from obtaining an abortion. I do believe that that was their goal, to hold her hostage until she carried this pregnancy to term against her will.
You may have seen some of our coverage of that case while it was underway, while it was being fought over in court. Eventually, the Jane Doe case landed in a high-level federal court at the Federal Appeals Court in Washington, D.C., in a hearing in front of a three-judge panel. The reason this Jane Doe case is once again national news all over again is because the three-judge panel that got that case at the appeals court in D.C., that included a judge named Brett Kavanaugh. And Brett Kavanaugh has now become President Trump's nominee to serve on the United States Supreme Court. And his confirmation hearings are due to begin tomorrow. Well, now, on the eve of his confirmation hearings tomorrow, we've got something. We have a tape that has never before been broadcast, as far as we can tell. And I know this is an odd thing. I think it's sort of an unsettling hallmark of this time in American life and American politics, that things that would otherwise be massive news stories or even massive scandals, they end up in this era like pipping for one hot second and then they just go away. I mean, my theory is that it's both just the sheer number of ethics and corruption scandals surrounding so many members of this administration, including the president, but it's also the fact that there's this one unprecedented existential scandal about this president and this presidency that makes it hard to stack up other more normal news stories and scandals and policy problems besides that big one. But even though things are the wrong proportion in this era in terms of the size of news stories anymore, we really are looking at a vacancy on the Supreme Court right now, which in normal times would be the dominant, biggest news story in the country for months. The retiring justice, of course, is Anthony Kennedy, who was the decisive centrist vote to uphold the right to get an abortion in this country. There is a general consensus that if President Trump's nominee, Brett Kavanaugh, is confirmed, he would become a decisive vote to eliminate the right to get an abortion in this country. Every year, year after year, the NBC Wall Street Journal national poll asks Americans the exact same question: should Roe versus Wade be overturned? Right now, the highest proportion of Americans ever recorded says that Roe versus Wade should not be overturned, that we should keep abortion legal in this country. 71% of Americans, 71%, now say Roe versus Wade should not be overturned. That 71% even includes a majority of Republicans. That's the highest ever result on that question, with a pending nomination of a judge who would be the decisive vote to overturn Roe if Trump succeeds in getting him on the court. And that kind of thing has consequences. A week after Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court was announced, the nonpartisan Pew Research Center just released a national poll that found that more Americans opposed the confirmation of Judge Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court than any other nominee in recent history. Opposition to Kavanaugh was even greater, the poll showed, than the opposition against Harriet Miers. Do you remember Harriet Miers? Harriet Miers' nomination is considered to be one of the worst botched Supreme Court nomination attempts, one of the worst nominees in modern history. I mean, facing a world of criticism, not only from Democrats, but also from Republicans. Harriet Miers had to withdraw as a nominee less than 1 month after she was picked for the court by George W. Bush in the first place. Harriet Miers' nomination is a famously disastrously bad Supreme Court nomination. Right? Nice woman, everybody said, lovely to be around. The president sure liked her a lot. Not a person who should be on the Supreme Court, concluded everyone, including ultimately Harriet Miers. Right? So it's not good news right now that President Trump's Supreme Court nominee is anywhere near the Harriet Miers standard of disapproval, let alone actually falling short of the kind of support that Harriet Miers received before she had to withdraw. So right out of the gate, a week out after he was nominated, we got this stark news that the Kavanaugh nomination was deeply unpopular. It was more unpopular than the Harriet Miers nomination. That makes it historically unpopular. Well, since then, he's been circulating on Capitol Hill, taking meetings with senators, right? The White House has been trying to build support for his nomination. Over that time, Brett Kavanaugh's poll numbers have actually gotten worse. His net support now is actually negative, -3. More people oppose his nomination than support it, which is not only worse than Harriet Miers, who had to be withdrawn for lack of support, it's worse than Robert Bork, who wasn't withdrawn as a nominee, but he was rejected by a large bipartisan majority in the Senate. This is interesting, though. The very, very, very bad polling about Brett Kavanaugh's nomination to the Supreme Court also shows us why his polling is so bad, why his numbers are so upside down. Turns out it's gender. Brett Kavanaugh's net support is negative overall in the country because he's net -18 with American women. That is a huge gap. By an 18-point margin, American women say, do not confirm Brett Kavanaugh to the Supreme Court. And again, this comes just as we've got confirmation that support for Roe versus Wade is at an all-time high. And it comes at a time when Kavanaugh is seen as a sure bet to overturn Roe versus Wade. And that sure bet is not just a gut instinct that you get from looking at the guy. It's on the tape that we've got that, again, we believe has never been broadcast before tonight. Brett Kavanaugh is already believed by his supporters and his critics alike to be a surefire, decisive vote to overturn Roe. But it's not a theoretical or academic argument when it comes to Judge Kavanaugh. Turns out we can watch him at work on the subject, or at least we can hear him at work on the subject. Okay, so this is the tape. This tape it's from the Jane Doe case from earlier this year during the Trump administration. Jane Doe, as I mentioned, was a teenager being held by the Trump administration in a shelter after she was picked up at the border. The ACLU sued the Trump administration on her behalf. After that girl realized she was pregnant, the Trump administration did everything they physically could to block her from getting an abortion, despite the fact that she had the right to do that in this country, a right that is currently protected by the Constitution, whether you're an immigrant or not, whether you're a teenager or not, whether you are in custody or not. The way that case went down is important. Even the government admitted that they weren't allowed to block this girl flat out from getting an abortion if she wanted one. They had to be sort of cute about it. They had to make it look like they were doing something else. The Health and Human Services Department really was physically holding her and not letting her leave to go to the doctor to get the abortion. So that made it a very difficult case to make, right? They're not allowed to just block her. They were just blocking her. But they had to come up with some explanation that made it seem not quite that straightforward. So here's how the government's intrepid lawyers tried to explain it to the court. The Trump administration said they weren't completely blocking Jane Doe's access to abortion because, in theory, they might be able to find a sponsor, sort of like a foster parent, to take custody of the girl. And then maybe that person, that sponsor, would let the girl go to the doctor and get the abortion. So the government would keep blocking her from going to the doctor, but they said they were sort of looking for someone else out there, someone who knows, might someday decide to let her go to the doctor someday. Somehow, maybe somewhere down the road. Right? That logic is a little bit bananas, but it also ignores the fact that Jane Doe had no control over whether she got a sponsor. The whole process of finding and vetting and approving sponsors for these kids is conducted and overseen by the U.S. government. Jane Doe had already been in their custody for weeks. They hadn't made any progress on finding a sponsor for her. Well, on the tape of the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals hearing on this girl's case, the man who is now Supreme Court nominee Judge Kavanaugh, turns out he really liked that argument from the government about some theoretical sponsor that might come along sometime, someday, somehow, who could maybe allow that girl to get an abortion sometime in the future. He really liked that argument, so the government could continue blocking her abortion until that fairy sponsor someday arrived. Well, this is the audio of the Jane Doe hearing in front of an appeals court panel that included Brett Kavanaugh. This was October 20th of last year. You'll hear Brett Kavanaugh's voice here. The other voice you will hear is Bridget Amiri, the ACLU lawyer who's representing the teenage girl, Jane Doe, in this case.
Both sides seem to agree on, under current Supreme Court law, the government can't block the abortion. And my question, I'll start with you, as I did with the government, doesn't the sponsor option, if it's effectuated, resolve the case? If it could be done by Tuesday, for example.
Your Honor, I'm not sure that...
Or Friday. And we have a couple weeks at most, and I realize you're going to say correctly that each day matters, and I understand that, completely understand that. But if the sponsor could be identified quickly, a sponsor, isn't that a best case scenario for JD? Because JD has a sponsor then and can also, if she chooses, obtain the abortion that she has so far elected to have.
I have no doubt that JD would rather be with an extended family member than be in a government-funded shelter. But I understand that process takes a significant amount of time. There must be a vetting process with the sponsor, a home visit. My understanding, it could take months.
It could take months. And for the teenager who was already pregnant, who was already being barred from going to her doctor's appointments to get an abortion, the clock is ticking, right? And that's a point that the ACLU lawyer made sure to press throughout the hearing, right? Bridget Amiri keeps making very, very clear that the delays matter, that the delays here cause, and have already caused at that point, real harm to JD, to Jane Doe, by forcing her already to stay pregnant when she doesn't want to be, by forcing her into a situation where the pregnancy keeps getting further and further along. And of course, if you push it far enough, at a certain point, it would be too late for her to actually get a legal abortion at all. And that seems to be Judge Kavanaugh's strategy here. I mean, listen to this next part of the hearing. You'll hear a third voice toward the end of this clip asking about the timing. That's another judge from the panel in this court, Judge Patricia Millett.
What we're talking about here is an unaccompanied immigrant minor, 17 years old, pregnant, who's been forced to remain pregnant against her will for 3 weeks now because the government has blocked her abortion decision. Every day she remains pregnant takes a toll on her physical and emotional health. She's going to be pushed further later into her pregnancy. She's already been pushed from the first trimester into the second trimester. The further that we get, the further risks that are apparent for her, and also if we get so far, she'll be forced to carry this pregnancy to term against her will.
At what point would you say that abortion will no longer be a safe option in this case?
Texas bans abortions at 20 weeks in pregnancy.
And she's 17 right now?
She's about 15 approximately.
15 is what you said yesterday, right?
Yes.
Or 2 days ago in the hearing, right? 15 weeks.
Approximately 15. But, Your Honor, I would also say, and I think as you have recognized, every day matters for JD. It's been 3 weeks, and it's been 3 weeks too long.
So Jane Doe's lawyer red flagging the urgency of this case. Right? And you get the sense, listening to this hearing, that Brett Kavanaugh understands. He acknowledges the tight timeline here, right? He asks follow-up questions about it. And the answers are very clear. Each passing day makes the abortion procedure riskier and gets this teenage girl closer to a legal barrier after which she can't get a legal abortion at all. They're forcing her toward that delay. Well, after hearing all that, listening and responding and asking thoughtful-sounding questions, Judge Brett Kavanaugh decided that what this teenage girl really needed, what Jane Doe really needed, was to wait some more. Actually, to wait a considerably longer amount of time. Judge Kavanaugh wrote the order in this case, ruling that the Trump administration should get another 11 days to keep blocking Jane Doe from getting an abortion while they continued to look for a sponsor for her. So that would push her pregnancy from 15 weeks into 16 weeks and into the start of the 17th week. And at the end of that extra waiting period, Judge Kavanaugh ordered the girl would still not be allowed to go to her doctor's appointment and get the abortion. At that point, she wouldn't even be granted the right to come back to Judge Kavanaugh and appeal again to him. He ruled that at that point, in her 17th week, after the delay that he was ordering, he would then order her to go back and start again at a lower federal court. And she could then try to get that lower court to rule again that she can get the abortion. And if she did get that ruling in the lower court, Judge Kavanaugh specifically notes in his ruling, the Trump administration could then, quote, immediately appeal back to him, where he would start considering the matter all over again. At which point she would be pushing into her 18th week, if she's lucky, more likely her 19th week, depending on courtroom schedules. Abortion becomes illegal in Texas after 20 weeks, so you can see where this is going. What was that about 20 weeks? Somebody say something about every day counts. How much longer can we make her wait?
At what point would you say that abortion will no longer be a safe option in this case?
The way this worked out is that Judge Brett Kavanaugh's ruling in this case got overturned by the full court a few days later. And so Jane Doe did not have to abide by this schedule he had set for her, and she was able to get the abortion that she was seeking. And Brett Kavanaugh wrote a long, blistering dissent complaining about being overruled in that case. Many legal observers now say that dissent was clearly part of his public audition for the Trump administration to pick him for the Supreme Court, which they did. This Supreme Court nomination, for a million reasons, hasn't been front page news as much as you might expect, which at this point is a little strange. Ask Americans if they want this nominee, and the answer is no. Particularly women say no. He is a historically unpopular choice, which itself, you think, would make this nomination if not a scandal, then at least a big focus of national media. Republicans have taken the unprecedented step of refusing to release his paper trail from his time working in Washington before he went to the bench. There's even a live and strange controversy over whether Brett Kavanaugh actually lied to the Senate the last time they held a confirmation for him back in 2006. The head of the Judiciary Committee actually referred Brett Kavanaugh to the Justice Department for potential prosecution for lying to the Senate when he was first nominated to be a judge. But aside from the process of how they are trying to get him on the court, apart from the strategy they're trying to use to get him on the court, on this Roe issue, whether or not you're part of the 71% of Americans who say they don't want Roe versus Wade overturned, there's a reason why people watching this nomination are quite perfectly sure that a Justice Brett Kavanaugh would become the deciding vote to overturn Roe versus Wade and make abortion illegal. And part of that reason is what he did just last year to try to push this 17-year-old girl 15 weeks, 16 weeks, 17 weeks, 18 weeks. How far can we push this? Is it too late now? Is it too late yet? We'll be right back.
At what point would you say that abortion will no longer be a safe option in this case?
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.